Anna adjusted her crisp white uniform in the hospital mirror, smoothing the creases with hands that trembled ever so slightly. On the surface, she looked composed, polite, professional, the kind of nurse who smiled at patients' anxieties and offered calm reassurance. Yet beneath that practiced exterior, a storm of unease churned relentlessly. Every day, she carried a secret that no one could guess. Not her colleagues, not the patients, and certainly not her family. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as she walked down the corridor, the hum of machines and the distant echo of footsteps blending into a mechanical rhythm that mirrored her heartbeat. Each step reminded her of the burden she carried, one that had grown heavier with each passing week. Anna's thoughts drifted briefly to her strict upbringing in a small Polish village, where devotion was measured in fear, obedience, and the suffocating weight of religious expectation. Her parents' sharp eyes and unwavering rules had always dictated her behavior, leaving little room for personal choice. She had learned early on that secrets were sins, yet here she was, harboring one that could shatter her world. During rounds, Anna paused at a patient's bedside, offering the softest of smiles. "How are we feeling today, Mr. Kowalski?" She asked, her voice steady, yet internally she flinched at the sight of herself reflected in the polished metal tray beside the bed. She forced a laugh at a nurse's passing joke, but the effort felt hollow. Her growing belly pressed against her uniform, and she instinctively adjusted the fabric, hoping the crease would mask the subtle swell. She could feel eyes flicker toward. Her casual glances, she imagined, were full of curiosity or suspicion. Her chest tightened. How long before someone noticed? How long before her carefully constructed facade cracked? A brief flashback seized her. The cold kitchen of her childhood home, her mother's admonishing tones slicing through her, the stern sermon at church about obedience and purity, the whispered threats of shame and disgrace if she ever stepped out of line. Those memories, buried yet persistent, now gnawed at her conscience with renewed intensity. Every smile she offered patients, every polite nod she exchanged with doctors, carried the weight of her double life. In the break room, she poured a cup of coffee, hands shaking despite her composure. A coworker glanced at her and murmured, "You've seemed different lately. Everything okay?" Anna's lips curved into a practiced, reassuring smile. "Just tired," she replied softly, voice steady, hiding the truth behind a veneer of normalcy. Her heart raced, mind spinning with calculations. What if someone discovered her secret? How would she explain the weeks she had vanished to run errands alone? How could she prevent her family from finding out the unthinkable? As she left the break room, Anna took a deep breath, smoothing her uniform again. Each corridor she walked felt like a stage where her performance was scrutinized, each patient interaction a test of her composure. Her inner world, a maelstrom of fear, anticipation, and moral conflict, remained invisible to everyone around her. Yet the tension built quietly, inexorably, like a shadow stretching longer with the dying day. She knew that every hidden step she took only delayed the inevitable. And deep down, she sensed that the next chapter of her life, one filled with choices she never imagined, was fast approaching, silently, with no one to witness the storm that had been quietly brewing within her. The morning light seeped through the hospital blinds, casting long, sterile stripes across the tile floor. Anna moved deliberately down the corridors, her uniform tight around her midsection, a constant reminder of the secret she carried. Each patient she passed seemed to gaze at her with unknowing curiosity, each colleague's casual remark a test of her composure. She felt the familiar pulse of anxiety tighten around her chest. Even a smile required careful calibration. No one could know. No one must know. Her thoughts flickered back to the night before, when she had spent hours crouched in her small apartment, tracing the faint curve of her belly, whispering apologies she could never voice aloud. The world outside seemed indifferent, Yet within her, guilt and fear collided violently. She could not permit herself to falter, not at work, not in front of the hospital staff, and certainly not in front of her family, whose eyes would cut through her like knives if they learned of her condition. At the nurse's station, she exchanged hurried greetings with Magda, a fellow nurse who had grown slightly suspicious over the past weeks. Magda's eyes lingered a moment too long, scanning for signs Anna had tried so hard to hide. "You've been quiet lately," Magda said gently, handing her a stack of patient charts. "Is everything okay at home?" Anna forced a light laugh, tucking her hands into the pockets of her uniform. "Yes, just busy," she replied. No explanation was offered, none was needed. In her mind, each answer was a carefully constructed shield against scrutiny, a barricade against discovery. As she moved from room to room, administering medication, checking vitals, and offering smiles that did not reach her eyes, Anna felt the weight of her dual existence more acutely than ever. Every patient's question, every cough, every passing glance reminded her of the life she had to conceal. Her footsteps echoed in empty corridors, a soft rhythm that mirrored her heartbeat, reminding her how precarious her secret truly was. A flash of memory jolted her, her father's stern voice at the dinner table, lecturing her about duty and virtue, her mother's cold, disapproving stare as she bent over her homework, a constant reminder that deviation from expectation was shameful. Those voices, once distant, had rooted themselves into her subconscious, guiding and punishing simultaneously. Now, they whispered warnings about the consequences of being discovered, the moral punishment she imagined she would face, even as her reality demanded practical concealment. During a brief lull, Anna ducked into the staff restroom, checking her reflection. She tugged at her uniform once more, adjusting the folds to hide the curve of her stomach. She placed a hand over it, feeling a tremor that she could not control. "Just get through today," she whispered, voice nearly lost amidst the humming of the fluorescent lights. The mirror reflected a face she barely recognized, pale, tired, haunted, yet still determined to survive the day without revealing the truth. Back in the ward, she delivered another tray of medication, avoiding eye contact with a patient who smiled, a little too knowingly. Small interactions, she realized, were dangerous. They offered a space for observation, for questions, for suspicion. And yet, she had to maintain the pretense of normalcy, to be the competent, cheerful nurse everyone expected her to be. Every interaction became a careful dance, every gesture measured, every word weighed against the possibility of discovery. By the time her shift ended, Anna's body ached, not from physical labor, but from the strain of constant vigilance. She moved through the hospital doors into the fading light of late afternoon, inhaling a shaky breath. Tomorrow, she knew, would be another day of silent struggles, another round of concealment and moral negotiation. And each day, the secret inside her grew heavier, its presence inescapable, pressing down on her mind and heart alike. Anna moved silently through the dimly lit aisles of the small pharmacy near her apartment, her hands trembling slightly as she picked up supplies. Each item, absorbent pads, small blankets, wipes, was carefully chosen and hidden under her coat before she stepped out into the cold evening air. She was meticulous, calculating every movement, every purchase, every glance around her as if the very act of being seen might unravel her carefully constructed world. Each footstep echoed the heavy weight of her secret, the knowledge that she could not afford a single misstep. Back in her apartment, she began organizing the small stash she had accumulated over the past weeks. A makeshift nesting of items formed, in a corner, carefully hidden behind loose boards in the closet. She ran her fingers over the soft blankets and towels, imagining a scenario she could barely allow herself to picture, the moment she would finally give birth. Her heart constricted as the reality of the situation pressed down on her chest. She had no family support, no husband, no friend who could help. She was utterly alone, and the consequences of discovery were unthinkable. A knock at the door startled Her. Anna froze, holding her breath as she listened. "It's just me," a soft voice called. Magda, the sympathetic nurse from work, peeked in. "I thought I'd check in," she said gently, concern in her eyes. Anna forced a smile, the kind she had mastered for patient interactions, and waved her off. "I'm fine," she replied softly, voice steady. They exchanged a few words about trivial matters, weather, hospital gossip, but Anna felt the weight of every glance, every question, and every pause. There was an unspoken understanding in Magda's eyes, a curiosity Anna could not afford to satisfy. After Magda left, Anna returned to her corner, pulling out a small notebook she had hidden for weeks. She scribbled lists, supplies, timings, escape routes, contingency plans. Each line etched into the page was a calculated decision, a lifeline in the storm that raged within her. The journal had become her confidant, the silent witness to a life that could not be spoken aloud. As she wrote, she could feel her pulse quicken, the reality of the upcoming event pressing closer with every passing day. Her mind drifted back to moments in her childhood home, when her mother's disapproving voice echoed in the hallways, chastising her for minor infractions. Her father's cold, judgmental eyes had been a constant presence, teaching her early that deviation from expectation carried severe consequences. Those memories now fueled both fear and determination, a duality that had become the essence of her existence. She could not fail. She could not allow discovery. Later, she imagined the hospital bathroom, the sterile tiles and cold walls, a place she had scouted carefully over several visits. She had walked the corridors countless times, assessing the risk of exposure, timing, the staff rotations, imagining the minutes when she would be truly alone. The thought of bringing her children into the world in secret filled her with a strange mix of terror and resolve. Every detail had to be perfect, every contingency accounted for. The night deepened, and Anna sat quietly in the dim glow of her bedside lamp, listening to the city outside. She whispered to herself, words soft and almost prayer-like. "Just get through it. Just get through it." The sound of her own voice, barely audible, was both comforting and haunting. Her mind traced the impossible path ahead: birth, concealment, survival. The lines between moral reasoning and desperate necessity blurred, and she found herself teetering on the edge of fear and determination. By the time she finally lay down to rest, exhaustion pressed heavily against her. Sleep came fitfully, punctuated by visions of hospital corridors, her secret swelling inside her, and the choices that lay ahead. She knew there was no turning back. The confined choices she had made, the meticulous preparations, and the moral compromises would soon collide with reality. The bathroom smelled of antiseptic and cold tile. Anna's breath came in shallow, rapid bursts as she crouched on the floor, her hands pressed tightly to her abdomen. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered intermittently, casting harsh, almost accusatory shadows on the walls. She gritted her teeth, trying to steady her trembling body. Every instinct screamed for her to leave, to escape, to run. But the culmination of weeks of careful planning had led her here, and there was no turning back. A surge of pain shot through her, and she clutched the edge of the sink, knuckles white. She whispered a trembling plea, words lost in the hollow echo of the tiles. "Please, just let me get through this." Her thoughts spiraled into fragments of memory. Her mother's sharp voice scolding her for imagined sins, her father's disappointed eyes, the small reprimands she had absorbed like punishment, shaping her into someone who could never fail or falter. Now, every lesson, every fear, every moral weight collided in this small, sterile room. The first cries, weak, fleeting, almost unreal, pierced her panic. She froze, chest tightening with a mixture of awe and terror. Anna leaned over, instinctively reaching for the fragile, squirming form she had brought into the world alone. Her hands shook violently, and she felt a pang of love intertwined with fear. a love she could not express, a responsibility she could not shoulder in the light of day. The room felt impossibly small, the walls closing in as the reality of her isolation pressed down on her. "Anna, what have I done?" she whispered, voice breaking as tears pricked her eyes. The words bounced off the tiles, a confession with no one to hear it. Every heartbeat sounded like an accusation, every shallow breath a reminder of the enormity of her choices. The twins, her children, lay fragile and vulnerable beside her. She ran a trembling hand over their tiny forms, her mind flickering between care and panic, between love and guilt. Her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror caught her eye. Pale, disheveled, sweat-matted hair sticking to her face. She barely recognized the woman staring back. This was not the composed, smiling nurse who walked the hospital corridors moments ago. This was someone fractured, raw, carrying the burden of an unspeakable secret. She pressed a hand to her lips, stifling sobs, whispering apologies she could never fully voice. The sterile environment, once neutral, now seemed hostile, mocking her fear and desperation. Anna's thoughts raced, the hospital staff in the next room, the surveillance cameras she had carefully avoided, the impossibility of concealment if anyone discovered her here. Every scenario, every contingency plan played in her mind, each one more desperate than the last. Her upbringing, the rigid expectations of her family, and the moral strictures she had internalized formed a cage around her mind. She realized, with a sickening clarity, that the moral calculus of her actions had reached a tipping point. Survival, secrecy, and fear now dictated her every thought. As she adjusted the blankets around the infants, a shiver of both horror and resolve ran through her. She whispered to herself, voice barely audible, "It has to stay hidden. It has to." The soar, flickering lights above seemed to pulse in time with her rapid heartbeat, a visual echo of the chaos within her. Every detail, the cold floor, the hum of distant machinery, the faint sounds of life outside the bathroom, grounded her in a reality that felt both immediate and surreal. Finally, she exhaled slowly, attempting to regain control. The moment of birth had passed, yet it left a residue of fear and uncertainty that clung to her skin and bones. She knew the choices ahead would demand even greater resolve, planning, and concealment. The world beyond the bathroom awaited, oblivious to the storm that had unfolded in its sterile corners, and deep down, Anna sensed that nothing could ever be the same again. The bathroom was deathly silent, save for the soft, irregular breathing of the newborn twins lying wrapped in a thin blanket. Anna crouched beside them, her hands trembling, violently, sweat stinging her eyes. The weight of the weeks of secrecy, preparation, and fear pressed down on her chest until it felt impossible to breathe. Every instinct screamed to protect them, to cradle them close, yet another darker instinct whispered that exposure would destroy everything she had worked to conceal. She stared down at the fragile forms, the tiny fingers curling and uncurling, the faint whimper of life vibrating against her ear. Her mind raced with fragmented thoughts, her parents' rigid eyes, her mother's sermons about shame, her father's cold disapproval. The world outside the bathroom had no place for mistakes, for deviation, for failure. And in that sterile, suffocating space, Anna made a choice that would define her life forever. Her hands hovered, shaking uncontrollably. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," she whispered, voice breaking as tears blurred her vision. The words sounded hollow even to her own ears, swallowed by the echoing tiles. She pressed her lips together, gripping the edge of the sink for support, the cold porcelain grounding her against the tide of panic and guilt threatening to overwhelm her. Every heartbeat screamed accusation. Every breath reminded her that there was no turning back. Anna's thoughts splintered into chaos. Visions of her childhood home, the moral lessons carved into her mind, the constant fear of shame, the rigid expectations that had shaped every choice she made. She remembered her mother's voice, sharp and unforgiving. "A secret dishonors the family. Obedience is life." And now, those lessons, internalized over years, collided with the soft, helpless whimpers of her children. She had no one to guide her. No moral compass other than the one shaped by fear, upbringing, and survival instinct. The first act was mechanical, almost detached. Her trembling hands moved over the small body of the first twin, pressing just enough to stop the faint rise and fall of its chest. She whispered apologies, words lost in the sterile air, a broken chant of remorse and necessity. Tears fell freely, mingling with the sweat on her face. The second twin stirred slightly, a faint gasp echoing in the small room. She hesitated, a shudder running through her body, the full weight of what she was about to do pressing down like a vice. A wave of nausea hit her. She bent over, gasping for air, trying to reconcile her love for the children she had just brought into the world with the unthinkable act she was compelled to commit. Every fiber of her being screamed against it, yet the fear of discovery, the moral pressure of her upbringing, the suffocating weight of secrecy drove her forward. The second twin, tiny and fragile, became the focus of her trembling hands. I didn't want this, she whispered, her voice nearly inaudible. And then, it was done. For a long moment, the room remained silent, except for her ragged breathing. The air seemed heavier, oppressive, as though the walls themselves bore witness to the unspeakable act. Anna collapsed against the tiles, knees pressed to her chest, tears streaming freely. Her mind swirled with disbelief and horror, guilt and relief, love and revulsion, all tangled together in a chaotic storm she could neither name nor escape. She pressed a hand to her forehead, rocking slightly, murmuring apologies to the children she could no longer protect. I tried to save you. Forgive me, she whispered. The bathroom's sterile scent, once neutral, now felt suffocating, a tangible reminder of her moral and emotional collapse. Her reflection in the mirror, pale and haunted, stared back at her, a stranger shaped by desperation and fear. Finally, she exhaled slowly, as though releasing the last remnants of the person she had been before this act. The quiet of the bathroom was suffocating and endless, yet it offered no solace. She knew the world outside continued, indifferent, unaware of the tragedy she carried alone. And in that moment, Anna understood the depth of her isolation, the enormity of her secret, and the irrevocable nature of the choice she had made. Anna stepped into the hospital lobby as if nothing had happened, her uniform crisp, hair neatly pinned, and a practiced smile in place. The fluorescent lights bounced off polished floors, reflecting a world that seemed ordinary, oblivious to the storm she carried inside. Each step echoed a careful choreography, one she had perfected over weeks of secret fear and preparation. No one could know, not yet, not ever. Her first patients of the morning greeted her with the usual warmth. "Good morning, Anna," a voice chimed, casual and unthinking. She returned the greeting with a soft, composed smile, letting the words slip effortlessly. Her mind, however, was a whirlpool of fragmented images. The twins, the sterile bathroom, the heavy scent of antiseptic mingled with guilt and terror. She pushed it aside, forcing herself to focus on tasks, to appear competent, to appear human. In the nurse's station, Magda glanced at her, eyebrows raised in subtle concern. "You seem a little off today," she remarked, watching Anna carefully. Anna tilted her head, brushing off the comment with the lightest laugh she could manage. "Just a long night," she replied, voice steady, eyes focused on the charts before her. Magda studied her for a moment longer, curiosity evident, then nodded and moved on. Anna exhaled silently. Each encounter was a test, and each successful. Deflection strengthened the fragile armor she had built around her psyche. She moved through the ward with a grace that belied her inner chaos, administering medication, checking vitals, offering gentle words of encouragement. To patients, she was the caring nurse they had always known. To colleagues, she appeared professional, cheerful, even efficient. Yet beneath the surface, every smile was an act, every nod a calculated motion. The weight of her secret pressed, invisibly against her shoulders, a silent reminder of the life-altering choice she had made just hours before. A small incident nearly unraveled her composure. A patient, curious and perceptive, commented on her pallor. "Are you feeling all right, Anna?" Their innocent observation, meant as concern, felt like an accusation. Her chest tightened. A fleeting wave of panic rose, threatening to expose her. She took a slow, deliberate breath, forcing her face into calm neutrality. "I'm fine," she said softly, voice even, masking the inner tremor that surged through her body. It was a lie, and yet it was necessary. Truth was a luxury she could not afford. Later, in the break room, she poured herself a cup of coffee, hands shaking despite her outward calm. The hum of the refrigerator, the chatter of colleagues, and the clinking of utensils formed a backdrop to the storm inside her mind. She caught her reflection in the window, a pale, exhausted face framed by perfectly arranged hair, and almost recoiled. That woman, composed and polite, was a carefully crafted mask, hiding someone fractured, haunted, and morally compromised. Throughout the day, Anna noticed subtle glances, minor gestures, small curiosities in others that could betray her. Each one triggered a twinge of paranoia. Was someone noticing her anxiety, her exhaustion, the slight bulge she could no longer hide so easily beneath her uniform? She reminded herself to remain calm, to be precise, to perform the role of the ordinary. Nurse perfectly, it was her only shield, her only protection from the judgment and suspicion that loomed like a specter over her life. By the end of her shift, exhaustion weighed heavily, not from the physical work, but from the mental strain of sustained deception. She left the hospital under the dim glow of evening lights, her footsteps deliberate, her mind racing. The twins, the secret, the irreversible act, all pressed against her consciousness. Yet she had survived the day. She had maintained the mask. And in her survival, she found a grim reassurance. The world could remain oblivious, but only if she continued the act flawlessly, every single day. Anna walked down the hospital corridor, clipboard in hand, each step measured, each breath controlled. On the surface, she was the same composed nurse she had always been, smiling at patients, checking vitals, exchanging polite words with colleagues. Yet beneath the mask, a gnawing anxiety had taken root, a quiet storm that no practiced calm could fully suppress. Small, subtle observations in her environment triggered it. Glances that lingered too long, whispers behind closed doors, gestures that suggested suspicion. During rounds, she noticed it first in Magda's eyes. A fleeting flicker of curiosity, almost imperceptible, but enough to make her stomach twist. "Everything okay?" Magda asked lightly, glancing down at Anna's uniform. Anna offered a soft smile, the kind she had perfected over weeks, masking fatigue, guilt, and fear. "Just tired," she said, voice calm, measured. The question lingered in the air, unspoken suspicions hovering between them. Anna felt a flicker of panic, realizing how thin her armor really was. As the day progressed, subtle tensions multiplied. Hospital staff whispered near the break room, and Anna's ears caught fragments of conversations she was never meant to hear. Names, rumors, observations, they swirled around her consciousness like distant echoes, each one a potential threat to the fragile secrecy she had maintained. She moved through her duties with careful precision, deliberately avoiding lingering in one place too long, forcing herself to appear distracted, yet competent. Every moment required vigilance, every gesture a calculated performance. At home, the pressure shifted. Her parents' phone calls arrived with more frequency and intensity. "Anna, we worry," her mother said one evening, voice tinged with sharp concern. "You've been distant." Anna's fingers tightened around the receiver, knuckles white. She forced calm into her voice, steadying it against the tremor that threatened to betray her. I'm fine, Mama. Just work is exhausting. Her father's disapproval, unspoken but palpable, weighed heavily even through the phone lines. The tension between her need for concealment and her parents' expectation of obedience gnawed at her. A brief flashback seized her. A Sunday morning, in her childhood, kneeling beside the altar, feeling her parents' eyes bore into her, weighing her devotion, scrutinizing every thought. That memory, vivid and sharp, resurfaced now, intensifying her dread. The lessons of obedience and concealment were ingrained, and the fear of failure, moral, social, and familial, pressed down on her with unbearable weight. She understood with chilling clarity that any misstep now could unravel her entire life. Back, in the hospital, a minor incident nearly triggered disaster. A patient noticed the subtle swelling of her abdomen, and Anna felt a surge of panic. She excused herself with an abrupt smile, her pulse hammering in her ears. Later, Magda cornered her briefly, voice soft but probing. "Are you hiding something? Anna, you can tell me." Anna's mind raced. A confession could not exist. Her carefully cultivated mask could not falter. "No, nothing," she replied, voice calm, eyes steady, heart hammering beneath the surface. The lie was fragile, but necessary. By evening, Anna's isolation had deepened. She walked through the quiet streets back to her apartment, each shadow seeming to whisper judgment, each passing passerby a silent observer. Her dual existence, obedient daughter, caring nurse, secret bearer, had become a performance she could never abandon. The cracks in her facade were widening, subtle yet unrelenting, threatening to expose the fragile web of secrecy she had so carefully constructed. She sat by the window, staring at the city lights, trembling in the darkness. Her thoughts churned. The twins, the hospital, the parents, the inevitable discovery. She understood that her world was fragile, balanced precariously between concealment and exposure. Every action, every word, every step now mattered. And deep, inside, she knew that the next slip, however small, could shatter her carefully maintained reality. The first knock on Anna's office door was soft, almost tentative, but it made her flinch. She looked up from her clipboard, forcing a smile that felt brittle even to herself. "Yes," she asked, voice calm, steady, a mask she had perfected over weeks of tension. The hospital administrator, a tall man with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression, stepped inside. "Anna, may I have a word?" His tone was polite, but it carried an edge that made her stomach tighten. She nodded, gesturing to the empty chair opposite her. Every instinct screamed alarm. The careful control she had maintained over her secret seemed suddenly fragile, like ice cracking beneath weight she hadn't anticipated. "Anna," he began, voice measured, "we've received some reports regarding suspicious activity near the staff restroom last week. Nothing definitive, but patterns have been noted." Her pulse accelerated. Her mind raced. Had someone seen her? Had she left something behind? Every hidden detail she had meticulously managed now threatened exposure. I don't know." "What you mean?" she stammered, voice tight, words carefully neutral. Her fingers gripped the edge of the desk, knuckles white, and she forced herself to breathe. Calm, composed. Everything depended on appearing ordinary, routine, nothing amiss. The administrator's gaze was steady, piercing. "We're conducting a standard review," he continued. "Staff interviews, observations, just a precaution. No assumptions are being made, but I want to ensure you are aware." He leaned back, studying her face for reactions. Anna forced a nod, swallowing the rising tide of panic. Every muscle in her body screamed, yet she maintained the mask of professionalism, replying, "Of course, I understand." After he left, Anna sank into her chair, shaking slightly. Her hands trembled as she gripped the clipboard, trying to ground herself. Narratives of her upbringing, her mother's reprimands, her father's cold eyes, the suffocating. Moral lessons surfaced unbidden. Each memory reinforced the terror of exposure. She realized with chilling clarity that one slip, one careless glance, one inadvertent gesture could undo everything. Later, Magda approached cautiously, leaning against the doorframe. "Are you okay? You seem tense," she asked softly. Anna's chest tightened, her thoughts scrambling for plausible answers. "Just a lot of work today," she replied, voice even. The lie was necessary. Magda's eyes lingered, searching, questioning, and Anna felt a pang of guilt, not for herself, but for the secret she had protected, the fragile reality she had constructed in isolation. The investigation continued subtly over the following days. Interviews were conducted with staff, supplies were checked, and routines scrutinized. Anna felt their gaze everywhere, invisible but heavy, weighing on her with every step. She moved through the hospital corridors like a tightrope walker, each action deliberate, each word carefully measured. Even the smallest hesitation, the faintest expression of discomfort, could invite questions she was not prepared to answer. Flashbacks haunted her during brief moments of solitude. Images of her parents scolding her for imagined misdeeds, sermons about virtue and shame, the relentless pressure of expectation. They all converged with her recent actions. She realized that the moral lessons that once guided her life now served as a source of terror, amplifying every choice, every risk, every heartbeat in this unfolding drama. By the end of the week, the subtle scrutiny had taken a toll. Anna's body ached with tension. Her mind oscillated between denial, rationalization, and creeping panic. Each day brought new challenges, stolen glances from colleagues, whispered conversations, the faint hum of suspicion in the air. She found herself double-checking everything, her uniform, her hair, the subtle curve she had been concealing for months. The psychological weight of concealment was growing heavier, pressing on her with relentless insistence. In the quiet moments before her shift ended, she whispered into the empty corridor, voice soft, trembling, almost a prayer. "Stay calm. Stay calm. Don't let them see." But she knew, deep inside, that her carefully maintained reality was cracking, that the fragile boundary between secret and exposure was thinning with every passing hour. The walls she had built around her dual existence were no longer sufficient. The unraveling had begun. The sound of heavy boots in the hospital corridor made Anna freeze mid-step. Her pulse quickened as she glanced around, scanning for any sign of a colleague or patient, only to find two men in plain clothes approaching. Detectives, their faces unreadable, their presence commanding attention. Anna's mind raced, a flurry of panic, guilt, and calculated calm. She forced herself to straighten her back, smoothing her uniform, masking the tremor she felt running through her body. "Anna Kowalska?" one of the detectives asked, his tone polite but firm. She nodded, swallowing hard, forcing her voice into an even, composed pitch. "Yes, that's me." He extended a notebook. "We need to ask you a few questions regarding events in the hospital this past week. Nothing alarming, just routine." Routine. The word made her stomach twist. Routine investigations never felt routine when her life teetered on the edge of exposure. She followed them to a quiet office, her mind racing with scenarios. Had someone discovered evidence? Had her carefully maintained secrecy finally cracked? She seated herself, hands clasped, trying to project the calm of the ordinary nurse she had performed so flawlessly. The questions began innocuously: times of her shifts, observation of colleagues, procedures she had followed. Each question, however, felt like a probe, a potential wedge between her and the fragile normalcy she clung to. She answered methodically, careful not to reveal more than necessary, aware that even the smallest slip could trigger suspicion. Her hands shook slightly under the table, but her face remained a mask of composure. Meanwhile, outside her apartment, Marek watched the world go by with an uncharacteristic unease. He had noticed Anna's strange behavior over the past weeks. Long hours, a distant gaze, moments of sudden anxiety. But he had dismissed them as stress from work. Now, the subtle hints of secrecy gnawed at him. Something was wrong, he realized, though he could not yet name it. Her laughter no longer reached her eyes, her smiles seemed rehearsed, and her voice occasionally faltered in ways he had never heard before. At the hospital, the detective's questions grew more specific. "Have you noticed any unusual activity?" "In the staff restroom," one asked, pen poised. Anna's stomach dropped. Her pulse thrummed in her ears, and she forced herself to speak calmly. "No, nothing unusual," she replied, voice measured, eyes steady on the notebook. Every syllable was a calculated act, a careful defense of the fragile reality she had created. As the interrogation continued, her mind drifted, as it often did, to her upbringing. The cold discipline, the moral absolutism, the endless lessons on secrecy and propriety. Those memories shaped her responses now, guiding her in deception, compelling her to maintain the performance at all costs. And yet, a gnawing fear persisted. One mistake, one misjudged pause, one subtle twitch could unravel everything. Later that evening, Marek arrived at the hospital under the pretense of visiting a friend. He noticed Anna in the corridor, her smile, polite but hollow, her posture rigid. The unease he had felt at home intensified, subtle details now magnified. The pallor of her face, the tension in her shoulders, the calculated movements that betrayed a rehearsed composure. He watched silently, heart tightening, realizing that something she was hiding was far more serious than mere stress. The detectives concluded their initial questioning, leaving Anna with a quiet warning. More interviews and observations would follow. She walked back to the ward, shoulders tense, mind buzzing with panic. Every corridor, every patient interaction, every passing colleague felt charged with scrutiny. The fragile mask she had maintained for weeks felt perilously thin, the walls between her secret and exposure dangerously fragile. Marek's eyes followed her from a distance, a silent witness to the tension she could not yet reveal. He did not know the secret she carried, but instinctively, he sensed the cracks beginning to show. Anna's world, meticulously controlled for months, was no longer entirely her own. Outside forces, investigators, colleagues, and even Marek's intuitive awareness were pressing against it. And deep inside, she knew the moment of reckoning was approaching, inevitable and unavoidable. The apartment was quiet, unnervingly. So, Marek stood near the doorway, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes fixed on Anna, who moved around the room as if unaware of the storm gathering. Her hands fidgeted with a tea towel, smoothing it over the counter, avoiding his gaze. The air between them felt charged, taut, every second stretching into an eternity. "Anna, we need to talk," Marek said, voice low but firm. The weight of those words made her stomach twist. She looked up, forcing a calm smile, but it faltered, just slightly. "About what?" she asked, the words brittle, rehearsed. Marek's eyes narrowed. He wasn't buying it. He had noticed the long hours, the hollow laughter, the distant gaze, the careful avoidance of certain topics. Something was wrong, something he could feel but could not yet name. "You've been different," he continued, stepping closer. "I see it in you. The tension, the secrecy. I know something is happening, Anna. Please, just tell me." His voice wavered slightly, betraying a mixture of fear and anger. Anna felt her chest tighten, a wave of panic rising. Her mind raced, calculating, rationalizing. One wrong word, one slip, and the fragile secrecy she had maintained for months could crumble entirely. I don't know what you mean," she whispered, voice low, trembling despite her best efforts. Her hands clutched the edge of the counter, knuckles white. Marek stepped closer, the concern in his eyes sharp, piercing. "Anna, stop lying to me. Stop hiding things. I can feel it. I can see it. I need the truth. Her thoughts spiraled. Her parents' rigid expectations, the moral lessons ingrained since childhood, the weight of secrecy that had defined her life for weeks. She realized, with a sickening clarity, that the moral and emotional barricades she had constructed were failing. She wanted to protect herself, to protect him, yet the truth clawed at her from within, demanding release. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them back, desperate to maintain the mask. "Marek, it's complicated," she said, voice faltering. Her mind searched for a way to soften the blow, to rationalize, to delay the inevitable. Marek's expression hardened, frustration mingling with fear. "Complicated? Anna, lives are at stake. What are you talking about? You're scaring me." Her breath came in short, uneven bursts. She looked down at her hands, trembling. I made a mistake," she whispered, voice barely audible. Marek's brow furrowed, leaning closer. "What mistake?" he demanded, heart hammering. Anna's mind flashed to the hospital bathroom, the twins, the irreversible act, the suffocating guilt and fear. It's about the pregnancy," she stammered. Her voice cracked, trembling with the weight of confession. I lost them. I couldn't." Her words trailed off, swallowed by shame and panic. The apartment seemed to close in, around them, the walls pressing, the silence deafening. Marek froze, the magnitude of her words sinking in. His eyes filled with confusion, grief and anger, a storm mirrored in his heart. "You, what?" he whispered, voice barely audible, disbelief lacing every syllable. "Anna, how could you?" His emotions surged, a mixture of betrayal, fear, and desperation. She looked up at him, eyes wide, raw, haunted. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I tried to protect everyone, from the shame, from the family, from you." Her voice broke, tears streaming freely now, the emotional dam finally giving way. Marek stepped back, running a hand through his hair, his own tears glistening. "Protect. From me, from your family. Anna, those were your children." His voice was a jagged mixture of grief and fury, echoing in the small apartment. She sank to the floor, head in her hands, sobs shaking her body. I know. I can't undo it. I can't." For a long moment, silence hung between them, punctuated only by the ragged breaths of two hearts breaking in tandem, the power dynamics of their marriage, the trust, the love, the expectation of obedience, and the control, had shifted violently. Anna's secrecy had fractured the foundation, and Marek's realization of betrayal cut deep, leaving a wound neither of them could ignore. Finally, Marek spoke, softer now, voice trembling. We need to figure out what happens next. I don't understand it. I don't even know if I can." Anna's eyes met his, filled with fear, remorse, and a desperate plea for understanding. The confrontation had ended, yet the fallout, the moral reckoning, the emotional devastation, the fragile remnants of trust, was only beginning. The hospital conference room smelled faintly of disinfectant and fear. Anna sat stiffly at the table, hands clasped tightly, knuckles white. Detectives, administrators, and legal representatives circled around, their eyes sharp, questions precise. The walls seemed to close in, amplifying the weight of the secret she had carried alone for weeks. Each step of the investigation, each collected piece of evidence, had led to this moment. Exposure. The lead detective cleared his throat, voice calm but firm. "Anna Kowalska, we have verified your actions regarding the births in the hospital bathroom. We will be proceeding with formal charges." The words echoed in the room, each syllable sinking into her like a physical blow. Her heart pounded, chest tight, every instinct screaming denial, yet the truth could no longer be hidden. Her mind drifted to her upbringing, the rigid morality lessons, the suffocating fear of parental disapproval, the constant pressure to conceal imperfection. Those lessons had guided her actions, twisted her moral compass, and justified the unthinkable in her own mind. Now all of it lay bare, leaving her vulnerable, exposed, and profoundly alone. Marek entered quietly, standing beside her, his expression a turbulent mix of grief, anger, and disbelief. He had listened, learned, and pieced together the truth in a way he could not ignore. The man who had once trusted Anna implicitly now faced the irreparable fracture of their marriage. His eyes met hers briefly, raw, haunted, searching, and she saw reflected there the depth of betrayal her actions had caused. Legal representatives outlined the process, the charges, and the expected consequences. Anna listened numbly, her hands gripping her knees, trying to reconcile the reality of the law with the emotional storm within her. Every detail was a reminder of her moral failure, every word a hammer striking at the fragile foundation of her identity. She had acted out of fear, out of desperation, yet now faced accountability in the starkest terms. Short dialogues punctuated the proceedings. A nurse who had suspected irregularities whispered softly, "I never imagined. I'm so sorry, Anna." Anna's lips trembled, but no words came. Marek's voice broke the silence, firm but trembling. I can't begin to understand this. I need answers, Anna." She turned toward him, eyes wide, raw emotions spilling forth. I know it's unforgivable. I was scared. I didn't know what else to do." The detectives presented evidence, hospital records, CCTV logs, and the accounts of staff who had noticed discrepancies. Each item, each timeline, each corroboration of events added weight to the unbearable truth. Anna's mind oscillated between rationalization and horror, trying to make sense of her actions, yet finding only fragments of moral clarity in a sea of despair. Marek listened, silent now, absorbing each fact. His grief was palpable, his confusion intertwined with anger. "Those were our children," he whispered, voice barely audible, shaking. Anna's tears flowed freely. "I know. I loved them. I loved them, I swear. I was trapped. I thought I could protect everyone." Her voice cracked, raw with emotion, exposing the depths of guilt and despair she had carried alone. The room grew still as the gravity of events settled. Anna's reflection on her upbringing, morality, and the devastating consequences of secrecy became painfully clear. Every decision, every concealment had led to this, an irreversible act met with the uncompromising clarity of justice. Marek's grief mirrored her own, a profound shared acknowledgement of loss and betrayal. Finally, the detective concluded, voice even. "This matter will proceed to the courts. Psychological evaluations will follow. Both the legal and emotional ramifications are significant." Anna nodded silently, feeling the crushing weight of inevitability. Marek placed a hand briefly on hers. Hesitant, conflicted, yet a faint acknowledgement of connection. In that touch lay grief, anger, sorrow, and an unspoken attempt at understanding, fragile but present. As the room emptied, Anna and Marek remained seated in silence, each grappling with the consequences, both legal and psychological. The truth had been unveiled, and nothing could erase the actions that had led them here. Their world had shifted irrevocably, leaving a landscape of moral reckoning, emotional devastation, and the stark reality of human fragility.